I was fine so far. When they told me do not move from the middle, we have to stand exactly here, I'm like, oh gosh, this is not going to be easy. Anyway, I just want to, before my session starts, I just want to thank Dr. Vijay Raghavan for giving me this opportunity and people like Sabrani who mentioned to me about this conference. Thanks again. Again, all of you had the opportunity to hear from a lot of professionals on the topic of autism, and it is amazing to hear from different scholars. I'm going to specifically talk about helping students with autism succeed in college. Why? We talk about children in schools all the time. We should do this, we should include them, we do amazing with kids in school. But what happens to these kids once they graduate from high school? In other words, once they turn 21, at least in the US, after the age of 21, they are out of high school. What happens to these kids after high school? As parents, as professionals, we have an important responsibility that we have to make sure where are they heading to. So I would also like to thank Stephen Shore. Stephen Shore is not here. Me and Stephen Shore has been interviewing people with autism. In fact, we have been studying people with autism, intellectual disability, and cerebral palsy for our research, but these slides will be specifically focused on autism. So as we think about college, when we think about college, for anybody, for typically developing students too, we think about the name. What's the name of the college? Which college am I going to go to? We think about the location. Where is it located? If somebody living in Trivandrum, probably, gosh, is it located in Trivandrum, or do I have to travel further? Same thing happens even in the US with parents. They think about location. They look at the ranking. How is it ranked? What's the class size? Do students have the opportunity to meet with the professor one-on-one, or is it a bigger campus? Or is it a smaller campus with smaller class sizes? We look at different program offerings. What are the different programs offered at the university or at the college? We look at retention, we look at graduation rates. And what if you're talking about a student with disability or a student with autism specifically? Is your son or daughter interested in college? You have to accept the fact that not everybody is going to go to college. Not every child with autism is going to go to college. And if you're thinking about a child with autism, you have to definitely ask the question, are they interested? What are the strengths and weaknesses? Facts, attending college continues to be one of the biggest dreams for students with autism and many other disabilities. Students with disabilities substantially transition from public schools or education institutions to segregated setting. I want to echo what Sidhya said today morning about students with people with autism not getting a job. And yesterday we heard from speakers where people with autism are going into military. Why am I interested in this research? Look at this. These are facts just based on research. Why is this happening? And why is it in countries like India, our children with autism who are very bright? I have worked with several families who have kids with autism who are extremely bright. Simple example, I worked with a kid, my iPhone got stuck. This 13-year-old kid took it out, fixed the whole thing. What is he doing right now? He's 24, he sits at home, morning till evening, doing nothing. I think as professionals, parents, scholars, we have an important role to think about. Is college an option for my son or daughter with disability? I always tell parents or professionals, especially when I work with professionals in India, children born in the US do not have extra wings or anything different. They are the same children as children born in this country. So why not we give or create opportunities for these children to think about college? Moving on, as we talk about college, if it's specifically for students with autism, there is academic demands. I'm sure most of you sitting in this room or have been to college, you know what are the demands when you are in a college setting. There is limited parental involvement. In other words, in a school setting, it's different. When it comes to college, it's an entirely different ballgame. Is your son or daughter or is a student with autism prepared to be in that classroom or in a college setting with limited parental involvement? Or is he or she ready to leave home and being in a dormitory? If the kid is in India, okay, there are many kids who can go from home to college and come back. Having to develop time management and organizational skills. How about the workload? I have worked with kids with autism spectrum ASD who has been in college at my university. I forgot to mention, at my university, I teach at Adelphi University in Long Island. We have a program called Bridges to Adelphi, or BAP. We take kids on the autism spectrum disorder who are interested in going to college. The program started with 20 students. Right now we have over 120 students who have autism spectrum disorders. It's not easy. It's not easy. The kids face a lot of challenges. There are also, and I'm going to talk specifically about that as we move on in the coming slides. Moving on, if you are thinking about college for students with autism, group dynamics. In a classroom setting, is your son or daughter or the person with autism ready to work in groups? Peer events or self-advocacy skills. If you need extra 30 minutes to take a test, do you feel confident enough to walk to the professor and talk to the professor or ask questions saying, I need extra 30 minutes to take the test? In the United States, there is a disability support office in most of the higher education setting. Say the kid is in India. I'm giving the scenario of India because I have been talking with few people. They talk about this as an ongoing issue even in this country. So when it comes to self-advocacy, is the person with autism ready to advocate for himself or herself? It's a new level of independence. As all of you know, college is a different ballgame, as I mentioned. Is the person able to make his or her own decision? Do you think you will fit into this above world of academia? In other words, in the circle, there are different points mentioned there. And is the student with autism whom you are working with right now, most of you are working with a lot of kids. If you are working with adults, do you think, wow, this kid, he or she can go to college? I'm going to share a study. I am a story collector, by the way. I collect stories. Most of my research focuses are qualitative. So, in fact, me and Dr. Shore just finished a book all about students with autism and different disabilities who went through college. What are the successes and challenges faced by these students? So 7 participants were not informed about attending college as a possibility after graduating from high school. School was excellent, but I was not informed about college. It's not working, okay. My high school teachers were great. I do not think they even thought about me going to college. If you look at the last point, my high school teacher advised me to consider working in a local food packing industry where I don't interact much with people. I still do not know why she told me that. When I see these stories, it always reminds me, we as experts, most of us in this room are experts, professionals. In other words, I wear the suit, I wear the tie. You don't question me, I make the decision. I am a medical doctor. Whatever I prescribe, you take the medication. That's the model we have been following all the time. So the same things happens in the field of disability too. When it comes to children with autism, experts make the decisions, which is fine, but are we really taking into consideration the strengths and weaknesses of kids with autism that we are working with, especially when they are adults? Lack of expectations from teachers, administrations, and career counselors at high school continued. My social worker told me not to attend college. You should not attend college as you cannot perform certain custodial skills. Again, Wrong advice was one of the biggest barriers that came up all the time during the course of the research, where participants shared, gosh, we were told, college, they were not told college was an option for them. Most of them had to make their own decisions, or the families pushed them to do that. The role of families was key. Parents motivated them the most to pursue higher education. That came in most of our studies we did when we were interviewing people. One of them decided to go to college when the student saw his siblings getting up in the morning, packing, taking the backpack, going to the college. Why not? I can go to college. 5 participants stayed with their parents during their entire college education. You can see some of the quotes there. The last point, first 1 year, my dad and mom took turns as PCAs. PCA stands for Personal Care Attendant. In one of the participants that I interviewed, he really didn't need a personal care attendant, but the parents decided to have a personal care attendant help with the student on a regular basis. So the role of families was huge. It's ongoing, and even talking about the Bridges to Adelphi program, when students come in, I forgot to mention, they have to go through the regular admission process. So you might think, gosh, is this a small special school within a higher education setting that he's talking about? No. So you have to, so if you are going to come to a bachelor's degree in business or bachelor's degree in, special education, a student with autism spectrum disorder should have to submit application, do all the paperwork like any other typically developing student going to college. Once they get admitted into the college, they can take advantage of the Bridges to Adelphi program, where we work as a team with the psychology department and within our program. So, life in college. They learned about their legal rights after starting their college. Till high school, teachers were there to help with IEP, Individualized Education Program, everything. But when they started college, they started learning about their rights, and for most of them, it took at least 1 year. They also believe that they learn many socially accepted practices through their college education. Things like time management skills. They started advocating for their own rights for the first time. They shared their feeling of being a matured candidate after earning a college degree. I had a student who told me, the professor told me to ask questions later because he took a lot of time during in-class discussion. Sometimes he would ask questions, he would get into an argument back and forth, but the student doesn't think that's an argument. He says, no, I'm just asking questions. So the professor told, would you be kind enough to ask me questions probably after the class or email me? So he said, I think it's the law, right? I can be in this class, I can ask questions. So he told it was the first time he was sharing such things with the professor. 6 out of 8 participants shared their feelings of being a stronger person after being in the college. There were several opportunities. All the participants had to educate their college classmates on their disability, change negative beliefs. They also learned about time management. For all the participants we studied, they said it was the best decision they ever made. Our study is still ongoing. Like 1 week before this trip, I didn't include that interview into this discussion. I was talking about, how are things going? He said, I drive my professor nuts sometimes, but I'm doing good. So sometimes it's challenging for professors, sometimes it's challenging for students too. Ongoing struggles in the college. 6 out of 8 participants did not make any friends without a disability. So you might think, once you get into the college, wow, everything is great. You are in college, life is simple, wow, it's easy. No, many of them didn't make any friends without a disability, which is an ongoing challenge, which goes back to what I said at the beginning of the presentation. We live in a society where segregation is there. We segregate people based on color, socioeconomic status, everything. We talk about inclusion, everything. That's all of you know. In reality, segregation happens, and sadly, many of our kids with autism get pushed down to the bottom. So that's why I wanted to share about this research. Stigma and social challenges, trouble with bigger class sizes. I had students with, had two students who had to leave classroom in between, and they had to change their majors for one of the students because the class size was big. He said it was too much for him. He didn't like to be in bigger classes with a lot of people. He didn't, he wanted smaller class sizes. So he had to change his major. Trouble with non-verbal communication from peers and professors. Dating never happened. I was interviewing this guy. He said, he wants to date. He wants to have a girlfriend. And he keeps saying, but I don't know how to read non-verbal cues. Sometimes I look at pretty girls. They show facial expressions, or they wing at me, but I don't know what he had a hard time understanding what they are trying to say. In other words, put ourselves in that situation. All of you, those who are in college, when you see people, you communicate through facial gestures sometimes. That became challenging for them. Very often, students in my class didn't know how to associate with people like me who is different. I think it's the same in many other different countries. It's not just in the US. Lack of opportunity to socialize with typical peers was an ongoing issue. One of my professors refused to let me in if I was 5 minutes late due to ride. I liked the professor, but I was upset. He got so upset, he would run out of the classroom. He would run in the hallway like 3 to 4 times, which would drive the professor nuts. But he came back, and he sat in the class. So it took more than one semester for the professor to understand this is the way it worked, but it was fine. He got into trouble. There was another kid who got into trouble for walking in late. Again, going back to Bridges to Adelphi program that I was talking about, students are paired with a typically developing college graduate student. They also are paired with academic coaches and also learning specialists who work very closely with the student. They meet with academic coaches twice a week and learning specialists on a regular basis. Ongoing struggles, unfair grading. Grade did not make sense to me. I argued with my professor. My answers were correct, but I failed. One of the kids wrote papers, but he didn't pay much attention to grammar, APA, different format. It's like, why did I fail for this test? So, classes that required fieldwork placed participants and informed them at the last minute. I was frustrated, I was screamed. In the specific program that I'm talking about, Bridges to Adelphi, students have the opportunity to earn their bachelor's in special education. They can go in, if they're interested, they can go into the School of Business. They can choose any field, but in the education department, if you have to become a teacher, they have to have certain hours in the field. So many students struggled with going into certain places. Transportation was an issue. And when it came to the placement of these students in different settings, if the placement came at the last minute, students with autism really struggled with that. 6 participants took appointments to meet with professors to discuss coursework. The students with autism, here you can see the second last point. At times I would try to answer questions and participate by asking more questions, but I was ignored at times. I did not get a direct answer to my question. Cancellation of classes by professors at the last minute with no notice was a challenge. Again, students without disabilities rarely took any initiative to be friends with individuals with disabilities. 7 out of 8 participants were never invited to or attended any social events. Going back to the program I was talking about, we also have opportunities for students for social gathering twice a week. They also go out as a group to different events from the campus. But they had less opportunity to make friends who did not have a disability. All participants shared incidences when they were ignored. I try to answer questions, but if they don't get it at the first time, or if I use my communication board, I am slow, but there are, in other words, think about it. When we work or imagine when you are in college, when you're talking with your friends, you ask a question, would you like to go for a movie? you would like an yes or no answer. When it was delayed, when the response was pretty slow, some of the typically developing students walked away. Transportation was an ongoing issue. Even after graduation, identifying a job, 6 participants are currently employed, which is great, which is different than my findings from kids with cerebral palsy. Adults with cerebral palsy whom I have been interviewing, I know several of them. I know a licensed psychologist. She earned her degree, have a New York State license, has been applying for over 3 years, not getting a job. But when it came to kids with autism, most of, 6 participants are currently employed. 1 participant currently teaches in a school. This is the same person who told dating never happened. But he's a great teacher. He gets very good evaluations. 7 participants have no friends from college. I emailed resumes one after another, walked into offices where there were no jobs, but he finally found a job at a bank. I gave up job hunting after 3 months. There was no response, but again, finally they got a job. I feel all employers have a preconceived notion of disability. They think we are not capable of doing certain things. Again, you can see, even after graduation, they faced social challenges. They were able to succeed. They were able to get a job. And yesterday we listened to how people were able to get into the military, which was amazing. So again, as I'm talking, I want all of you in this room, especially who works with adults with autism, in this setting, you have to start thinking about it. If things happen, if kids with autism can get into the military in a different country, or if kids with autism can go into the college education, why not these similar things happen here? We celebrated Indian independence the other day. So, wow, we have freedom, right? Really think about it. Think about children with autism and children with other disabilities. Do they really have freedom? I don't think so. What are some recommendations for practice? We have to expose students with disabilities to college level classes and introduce them to college life prior to graduating from high school. Think about it. Instead of waiting for the last minute, in United States, children at the age of 16, federal law requires every child with disability to have a transition plan by the age of 16. But I tell my teachers, start as early as 14. So start thinking about it. If you're right now working with students with autism, think about it. Wow, this kid is amazing. He or she can do all these things. Why not think about college? Start preparing them. Prepare students academically for college. We need highly qualified teachers and transition professionals to help students successfully transition from high school. Again, understand the successes and challenges of attending college versus school. They are 2 different things. Help cope with frustration, depression, anger, panic attacks. These all things are going to kick in. We cannot leave them alone and just walk away. You have to provide the support. Educating students on their rights, laws governing post-secondary education. Developing individualized transition plans. I always believe in partnering with local education institutions or universities. For example, CADER, or, when you're here, work with Kerala University or other educational institutions that are locally, and I always believe in that. And see if you can work out a plan where during summer, 6 of your students, or at least 1 of your students, can sit in a college classroom by working with a college professor. Can they sit and observe how the classroom look like? What is the experience going to be like? Consider the climate of your future campus and their philosophy prior to the admission. Learn about support and services in the college. Are you going to get enough support services within the college? These recommendations, specifically, if you have, I'm talking about in the Indian scenario, if you're going into a college, are the professors or the educational institution willing to make the accommodation that this kid with autism can get extra 30-minute or 40-minute to take a test? Or when 50 students are taking tests in this classroom, is the college going to give me permission for my son or daughter to take a test in a different classroom? Ask questions with your concerns. Conduct research to gather enough resources. Students with disabilities should consider actively involving in selecting the right PCA. Be open in letting them know about your expectations. Explore different possibilities for transportations.
Also, college admissions office, they have to also communicate with professors. It's a group effort. It's like in the US, oftentimes, in the United States, when you go into a public school, if you have a son with autism or any disability, you walk into the school, everybody will point you at a special education teacher. She is the expert. It happens there too. There are some schools that are different. But instead of saying it's just the job of the special education teacher, it's a job of everybody. So college admissions office, the support office should inform professors. Consider summer orientation prior to admission process. Consider matching students with professors and typically developing students who have prior experience advising or mentoring students with disabilities. Professors should consider the reality that there might be many students who do not know how to educate others regarding the disability. In other words, education of professors is key in the higher education setting. For example, if Khader is going to take up a project of, okay, let's think about transition to college. So it's if you are thinking about such a project, the higher education professors or professionals should be equally educated on the topic. Tips for students. If you're students with autism, be an active member of your transition planning meeting. Be an advocate for yourself. Instead of parents or professionals making decisions for you, teach them about self-advocacy. I was born and raised in this country, and most of you sitting here, you know how parents make decisions for you. If you're going to handhold the child for the whole time, when is the child going to be independent? So think about advocating for himself or herself. Decide if you want to pursue college. As I mentioned at the beginning, college is not for everybody. So is your son or daughter, or if you are a person with autism, do you really want to go to college? Educate yourself on the different options outside of high school. Learn about your rights. Visit several campuses. Make sure you fit into the campus. When I say fit into the campus, you need your own personal space. It's just not the physical accessibility. Think about all other accessibility. You might be going through emotional stress, different things, and are there spaces where you can go and have your own personal space, even being in the campus? Take a tour and talk to school officials, students, and alumni. Identify resources, including the financing of education. Actively involved in the admission process. Finance is key. I was talking with Dr. Matthews, who told she was going to, she has got a program approved for higher education for students with autism, but no funding. Choose your classes and plan in advance. Meet and talk to professors. Initiate conversation and make new friends inside and outside of your classroom. Advocate for your rights. Thank you.